I've always had a passion for hiking, reveling in the serenity and beauty that nature offers. There's something remarkable about being surrounded by lush greenery and the sounds of wildlife, something that rejuvenates the spirit. However, just recently, I went through an experience that shook me to my core and has since instilled a deep sense of fear regarding an activity I once cherished so much. I feel compelled to share my experience and warn others. Please do not hike the Erie Ridge Trail. Before this incident unfolded, I had heard whispers of strange occurrences and eerie tales, but my personal experience transformed me into a firm believer in those unsettling rumors. The event took place on a bright, sunny weekend when a group of my friends and I decided to embark on a hiking expedition at a well-known national park nearby. This park is home to a trail notoriously dubbed Lost Ridge, which has gained infamy for bizarre phenomena and mysterious disappearances. At that time, though, such stories seemed like frivolous town gossip, not something to be taken seriously. With excitement bubbling within us, we packed our backpacks with all the essential gear and set out on our much-anticipated adventure. As we made our way along the winding trail, we were enveloped by the grandeur of towering trees and the soothing sounds of crystal-clear streams nearby, truly soaking in the majestic scenery all around us. Every now and then, cheerful birds would chirp above us while the leaves rustled gently in the breeze, filling our hearts with a profound reverence and joy for the wonders of nature. However, as we drew nearer to Lost Ridge, almost imperceptibly, the atmosphere shifted in a dramatic fashion. The air grew thick, heavy with an unsettling tension, and it felt as if the leaves on the trees had begun to whisper softly, although we couldn't decipher what they were saying. I felt a chilly shiver run down my spine, but decided to shake it off. Ignoring the growing unease within my gut, we continued walking until we stumbled upon a lone hiker making his way down the trail. His complexion was pale, his body visibly trembling, and a deep sense of anxiety radiated off him. He told us that he had been attacked while resting in his tent. At first, we were skeptical, thinking perhaps he was pulling our leg, but then he revealed horrifying wounds on his arm, a series of deep lacerations that looked as if inflicted by some wicked, sharp blade. I heard strange noises during the night. It sounded like whispering, he said, his voice barely above a murmur. Then, I sensed something drawing near, and before I knew it, I was caught off guard and attacked. Initially, we intended to comfort him, but as he spoke, his descriptions transformed into something more bizarre and surreal. He mentioned seeing a dark shadow lurking nearby, eyes seemingly fixed on him as if it were stalking him. A palpable sense of dread filled the air, making it incredibly difficult to breathe. With a shared understanding, we made the decision to turn back, prioritizing our safety over the thrill of exploration. However, as we made our way back, a series of bizarre occurrences began to unfold. The environment around us turned eerily silent. Not a whisper of wind could be felt, as if the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for something. In that unsettling stillness, we began to hear distant whispers, a haunting chorus of countless voices appearing to compete in sharing their urgent stories. The chilling sounds sent our hearts racing, and goosebumps rose on our skin. Afterward, we decided to take a break next to a small creek to catch our breath and calm down our racing hearts. As I prepared to take a sip of water, one of my friends suddenly pointed at the surface of the water, his face frozen in terror. "Did you see that?" he stammered, nervously gesturing toward the creek. We leaned closer to investigate, and to our horror, we observed a distorted, vaguely human-like figure reflected in the water, lurking just beneath the surface. A wave of nausea hit me, and I felt a terrible sense of foreboding creeping into my mind. We agreed unanimously to leave that area immediately. Just as we resumed our journey, I glanced back and was taken aback to see the figure dissolve from the water in a split second. My heart pounded in my chest, and a whirlwind of thoughts raced through my mind as I struggled to convince myself that it was just some illusion. But my instinct screamed for me to move faster, to escape whatever was lurking nearby. Suddenly, a rustling noise came from behind me. I turned around, only to find that the hiker had completely vanished, like he had been swallowed by the mysterious forest, leaving no trace of his presence. "Run! Don't stop!" I shouted, urging my friends to follow my lead. As we quickened our pace, the eerie whispers seemed to close in on us, relentless in their pursuit. We could only sprint as fast as our legs would carry us, but the fog thickened around us, wrapping us in an oppressive shroud of anxiety and fear. It felt as though we were suffocating in it. Eventually, we managed to reach the parking area, and for a brief moment, I thought we could finally breathe. But when we returned to our car, we were shocked to find the missing hiker sitting lifelessly in the back seat. He looked even paler than before, completely expressionless, and just staring blankly ahead, a vacant look in his eyes. "Where have you been?" I asked him, my voice trembling with horror, but he did not respond. As I looked at him, an overwhelming sense of fear filled the air around us, and an unsettling feeling washed over me. It was as if he was fading away, and the landscape around us started to feel dreamlike and surreal, slipping out of focus. That night, we drove home in complete silence, each of us unable to shake off the looming sense of dread that had settled deep within us. No matter how many questions we directed at him, the hiker said nothing, offering no answers, as if all memories of what he had encountered had been wiped clean. A few days later, I stumbled upon a news report discussing Lost Ridge, where animals had mysteriously begun to disappear, and to add to it, the park itself was closed to the public. What remains inexplicable to me is that the hiker seemed to have vanished completely. Whenever my friends dare to mention that hiking trip, a heavy silence blankets the conversation. We silently agreed to never return to that dreaded trail again, ensuring that we keep our distance from its haunting allure. I sincerely hope that this cautionary tale serves as a warning to potential adventurers. Absolutely steer clear of Lost Ridge. This place seems to conceal an unspeakable horror, and perhaps the whispers you hear are not from the gentle embrace of nature, but from some malevolent entity patiently waiting to claim its next innocent soul. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. After quitting my office job, I found work at a bar in a small town that felt like a world away from my previous life. This was my choice for a fresh start, a chance to reinvent myself, and it was there that I met my only companion, Jenny. From the moment we met, her laughter was like the bar's most popular cocktail, intoxicating and delightful, bringing joy to everyone around. Our days working together at the bar were filled with laughter and camaraderie, and everything seemed perfect, like a dream come true, until that foggy night arrived, shrouding everything in mystery. That evening, as I finished my shift, the fog rolled into town like a mysterious veil, casting everything in a thick gray shadow that made the familiar streets feel alien. I had just clocked out and was getting ready to head home when Jenny approached me, her face etched with concern and worry. "You should stay here tonight," she urged, her voice tinged with unease. "It's too dangerous outside in this fog." "I'm fine," I replied with a reassuring smile, but deep down, I felt a twinge of anxiety creeping in. "It's just a short walk, really." However, Jenny's eyes told me she didn't believe my words. The truth was, my place wasn't far from the bar, but tonight's fog made it feel like I was trapped in an unknown gray void, where every step could lead to something unexpected. Just as I hesitated, my phone rang. It was an urgent call from my roommate. His voice came through frantic and panicked, talking about something I couldn't quite grasp. Maybe his car had broken down or something worse had happened. Either way, I had to go back immediately, no questions asked. "Sorry, Jenny, I have to leave," I said, offering her a quick goodbye while trying to resist the unease that was growing in my gut. As I stepped into the fog, everything around me seemed to be swallowed up by the thick mist. The path beneath my feet blurred into obscurity, and the air felt heavy and oppressive. With every step I took, I could hear my heartbeat echoing loudly in my ears, as if it were warning me of something lurking just beyond my sight. In that dense fog, my instincts screamed that something dark and sinister was hiding in the white void, waiting for the right moment to strike. I walked on, my senses heightened, and suddenly, a figure emerged from the fog ahead. It was a tall, thin man standing in the middle of the road, his face shrouded in shadows, barely visible as he stared at me with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. An indescribable fear surged within me, and instinctively, I froze in place, unable to move. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice weak and feeble, barely audible in the thick fog surrounding us. He didn't answer. He just leaned forward slightly, a cold smirk playing at the corners of his mouth, sending a shiver down my spine. Driven by a mix of fear and instinct, I decided to turn and run, hoping to escape whatever danger he represented. But just then, he lunged at me, his hand cold and merciless as it grabbed my wrist with a grip that felt like iron. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice deep and hoarse, as if it came from the very depths of hell itself. My reaction surprised me. The keys I had clutched in my palm felt like a beacon of light in a snowstorm, a desperate weapon against the encroaching darkness. I lashed out, pressing the keys against his neck in a frantic attempt to defend myself. His expression turned sinister, but there was also a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Are you really going to shoot?" he threatened, his tone dripping with disbelief. My mind was filled with desperate struggle, but overwhelming fear pushed me to make an irreversible decision. I pulled out my gun from my pocket, something I had thought I would never have to use in my life. Just as I was about to back away, he lunged at me again, his immense strength knocking me hard to the ground, the impact taking my breath away. In the chaos of the moment, I fired a shot, the bullet slicing through the night air, breaking the silence of the fog with a dull thud that echoed in the stillness. He fell to the ground, and the fog instantly receded, revealing his shocked face, eyes wide in disbelief. But at that moment, endless fear and despair flooded my heart, drowning me in a wave of panic. I fled the terrifying scene, my mind fixated on one thought: I had to get home and make sure my roommate was safe, no matter the cost. When I finally returned to town, I felt dizzy, my nerves numb and the world around me surreal, as if I were moving through a dream. A wave of intense guilt mixed with regret washed over me until I heard a suffocating statement that made my heart drop. "Have you heard? Jenny's in trouble," another colleague from the bar rushed over, visibly panicked and out of breath. "She was attacked in the fog, and no one could help her." My heart stopped. It felt like it was being ripped apart, a sharp pain slicing through my chest. I couldn't fathom how foolish my choices had been that night. I could have stayed at the bar to protect her, but instead, I chose to take a risk, leading to all of this chaos and heartbreak. The guilt and regret wrapped around my heart like invisible ropes, choking me, making it hard to breathe. In that fog-laden night, I lost Jenny, the one person who brought me comfort and joy in this town. Her smile, her laughter, everything would fade from my memory, lost like the fog that night, never to be found again. It haunted me, the realization that I would never hear her voice or see her face again. From that day on, I no longer trusted the dark fog that rolled into town, nor did I believe it could offer any safety or solace. Every time the mist rolled in, an unnamed fear would invade my heart, a reminder of the loss I had suffered. I still couldn't shake off the memory of my friend or the guilt that clung to me like a shadow, a constant reminder of the night everything changed forever. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I never held any belief in fairy tales or the supernatural. My life was firmly rooted in the realm of reality, where logic ruled supreme and the bizarre was merely a figment of overactive imaginations. The world I inhabited was one of clear cause and effect, where every action had a predictable outcome. That was until I stumbled upon the cursed pact that would irrevocably change everything I thought I knew. It all began on a dreary autumn evening, the kind where the sun barely pierced through the thick, gray clouds that hung low in the sky. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. I was wandering through the woods behind my house, seeking solace from the chaotic world of work and the never-ending responsibilities that weighed me down. The trees stood tall and foreboding, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, casting long shadows on the ground. As I walked deeper into the forest, I felt an inexplicable pull, as if something unseen was beckoning me closer. That's when I found it, a small, shimmering figure flitting among the underbrush. At first, I thought it was merely a trick of the light, a fleeting illusion created by the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. But as I approached, I could see it clearly, a tiny creature with iridescent wings and a mischievous grin. It was a fairy, or so I thought. But as I drew nearer, a chill ran down my spine. This was no ordinary fairy. There was something dark and sinister about it that sent a shiver through my veins. "Welcome," it said, its voice sweet yet laced with an undercurrent of malice that made my skin crawl. "I am Nyx, the keeper of rules. I offer you a pact." I was skeptical but intrigued. "What kind of pact?" I asked, my heart racing with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Nyx fluttered closer, its wings casting strange, flickering shadows on the ground. "A simple agreement. You must follow my rules, and in return, I will grant you what you desire most." "What's the catch?" I inquired, ever the pragmatist, unwilling to be swayed by the allure of its offer without understanding the implications. "Should you falter, those around you will suffer. The consequences will be dire," it warned, its smile widening, revealing sharp, glistening teeth that hinted at its true nature. I hesitated, grappling with the weight of its words. But the temptation of power and influence was too great to resist. I was tired of being overlooked, of living in the shadows of others. So, against my better judgment, I agreed, thinking I could easily uphold the rules. Little did I know, I was sealing my fate with a decision that would haunt me for the rest of my life. For weeks, I adhered to Nyx's guidelines, striving to be the perfect person in every aspect of my life. I volunteered at the local shelter, helped neighbors with their groceries, and even mended broken fences for those in need. I felt a sense of pride swell within me, believing I was making a genuine difference in the lives of those around me. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to notice something strange and unsettling. Every time I made a mistake, no matter how minor, something terrible would happen, as if the universe was conspiring against me. It started with my friend Mark. One evening, I forgot to call him for our usual game night, a small oversight that I thought would go unnoticed. That night, his house caught fire, the flames consuming everything in their path. He barely escaped with his life, suffering severe burns that left him scarred both physically and emotionally. I was devastated, plagued by guilt that gnawed at my insides like a ravenous beast. Had my negligence invoked Nyx's wrath? The thought tormented me, twisting my stomach in knots. Then came the tragedy of Mrs. Henderson, my elderly neighbor. I had promised to check on her, but life got in the way, as it often does. When I finally visited her days later, I found her lying unconscious on the floor, having suffered a stroke. She passed away the following week, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my failure to keep my promise had contributed to her demise. The weight of that realization crushed me, and I felt as though I was drowning in an ocean of despair. The more I tried to be a good person, the more I stumbled and fell. I was constantly on edge, fearful of making any mistakes, no matter how trivial they seemed. I began to isolate myself, avoiding friends and family to prevent any potential harm from coming to them. I couldn't bear the thought of being the cause of another tragedy. But the darkness loomed larger with each passing day, and I felt Nyx's presence lurking in the shadows, waiting patiently for me to slip up. One fateful day, I was in a rush to get to work, my mind racing with thoughts of deadlines and responsibilities. In my haste, I accidentally cut off a driver at an intersection. It was a minor error, one that I had made countless times before without consequence. But that evening, I learned that the driver had crashed into a tree. He survived, but his passenger, a young girl, did not. The news hit me like a freight train, and I was consumed by despair. I had done everything right, yet here I was, responsible for another tragedy that I could never have foreseen. As I spiraled deeper into a pit of anxiety and guilt, I sought answers in the only way I knew how. I delved into the lore of fairies and curses, hoping to find a way to break Nyx's hold over me. I discovered tales of others who had made similar pacts, each ending in horror and despair, their lives irrevocably altered by their choices. The more I read, the more I realized that there was no escape from the grip of Nyx. It was a master of manipulation, feeding off my fear and remorse like a parasite. Desperate and cornered, I confronted Nyx in the very woods where we first met. "I want to break this curse," I shouted into the darkness, my voice echoing among the trees, filled with a mixture of anger and fear. Nyx appeared, its eyes glinting with amusement, as if my plight entertained it. "You think you can escape? The pact is sealed, and your fate is intertwined with mine. The only way to lessen the suffering is to strive for perfection." "But I can't. I'm only human," I pleaded, tears streaming down my face, my voice cracking under the weight of my emotions. "I can't be perfect." "Then you will continue to watch as those you care for suffer," Nyx replied, its tone cold and unyielding, devoid of empathy. "Your mistakes will always have consequences, and you will bear the burden of your failures." I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by despair. The weight of my failures bore down on me like a crushing wave, and I felt utterly alone in my suffering. I had become a prisoner of my own making, trapped in a relentless cycle of guilt and fear that I could not escape. In the weeks that followed, I tried to maintain a facade of normalcy, but inside, I was crumbling. I avoided social gatherings and turned down invitations, fearing that my presence would bring harm to those I loved. My friends grew concerned, but I couldn't bring myself to explain the horror that had taken hold of my life. The thought of burdening them with my troubles felt unbearable. One night, I received a call from my friend Sarah. She was in tears, her voice trembling as she explained that her father had been in a terrible accident. He was in critical condition, and the doctors weren't optimistic about his chances of survival. My heart sank as I realized that I hadn't called her in weeks, too consumed by my own fears and anxieties to check in. I felt the familiar grip of guilt tightening around my throat, choking me with its relentless pressure. As I sat alone in my darkened room, I could feel Nyx's presence creeping closer, its influence suffocating me. I could hear its laughter echoing in my mind, a sinister reminder of my failures and shortcomings. I had tried to be good, to do right by others, but it seemed that no matter how hard I tried, I was doomed to fail, forever ensnared in the web of my own making. In a moment of desperation, I decided to confront Nyx one last time, hoping to find some semblance of resolution. I ventured into the woods, my heart pounding with fear and determination. "I won't let you control me anymore," I shouted into the night, my voice filled with defiance. Nyx emerged from the shadows, its expression unreadable, a mixture of amusement and disdain. "You think you can defy me? You are bound by the rules you accepted, and there is no escape. I refuse to be a pawn in your game," I cried, my voice trembling with emotion. "I'll find a way to break this curse, even if it kills me." Nix's laughter echoed through the trees, sending chills down my spine, a haunting reminder of the futility of my struggle. You cannot escape the truth. Your nature is flawed, and you will always bring suffering to those around you. It is your destiny. In that moment, I realized the futility of my struggle. No matter how hard I fought, I would never be free of Nix's influence. The darkness had seeped into my very being, and I was forever marked by the pact I had made, a stain that could never be washed away. As I walked back home, I felt a sense of resignation wash over me, a heavy cloak of despair settling on my shoulders. I would continue to strive for goodness, but I knew that every misstep would carry dire consequences. I would live in constant fear, forever haunted by the specter of Nix and the tragedies that followed my every mistake, a shadow that loomed over my existence. And so, I became a ghost of my former self, wandering through life with a heavy heart and a spirit weighed down by sorrow. I tried to help others, to be the person I once aspired to be, but the shadows loomed large, and I could never shake the feeling that I was a harbinger of doom, a bringer of misfortune to those I cared for. In the end, I learned that some pacts are not meant to be broken, and some curses are eternal. I am forever trapped in a cycle of guilt and despair, a prisoner of my own making, haunted by the consequences of a single, fateful decision that altered the course of my life forever. The weight of my choices hangs heavy on my soul, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks just beneath the surface, waiting for the next moment of weakness to strike. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I still remember that day. It was the day everything changed forever. It started off like any ordinary Friday, with the sun shining brightly in a clear blue sky and the streets bustling with life, laughter, and the sounds of people going about their daily routines. However, as the day slipped into night and the clock struck midnight, my world was drenched in shadows, and everything I once knew began to unravel. I had just left the library, where I had spent countless hours poring over dusty books, losing myself in the pages of stories long forgotten, stories that had provided me solace in a world that often felt overwhelming. But that evening, something was off, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The air was heavy with an eerie stillness that seemed to wrap around me like a shroud, and I felt an unsettling chill crawling down my spine as I walked toward my car, my heart thudding in my chest. My friends, Chelsea and Luke, had waited for me outside, their faces etched with concern that sent a jolt of anxiety through me. Chelsea's eyes were wide, a mix of fear and excitement swirling within them. "Emma, you must have heard about the attack," she whispered urgently, her voice trembling slightly. I shook my head, clueless about what she was talking about. Luke placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, his grip firm yet reassuring. "Let's get you home," he said, his tone brokering no argument. Little did I know that home wasn't a sanctuary anymore. It had become a trap, a place where shadows lurked and memories haunted. Days later, I found myself in a sterile hospital room, the faint beeping of machines creating a discordant symphony that echoed in my mind. The memories came rushing back, Chelsea's scream echoing in my ears, a sound that would haunt me for the rest of my life. She didn't make it out after we were attacked, and the guilt weighed heavily on me, pressing down like a leaden blanket. Each second in that room amplified the darkness enveloping my mind, twisting my thoughts into a chaotic spiral of despair. I'd survived, but at what cost? As I lay there, haunted by the loss of my friend, a thought emerged from the depths of my grief. Perhaps this wasn't over. Perhaps I could bring her back, somehow reverse the terrible fate that had befallen her. That night, I felt a surge of desperation clawing at my insides. I turned to Luke, my last ally in this forsaken world, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need your help," I murmured, my voice trembling with fear and uncertainty. "Bring salt, candles, and a book with a red leather cover. He stared at me, disbelief etched across his face, his brow furrowing as he tried to process my request. "Emma, this is insane." "You can't be serious," he replied, his voice laced with concern. But deep down, Luke knew better than to refuse me. He had always been the one to stand by my side, even when the world felt like it was crumbling around us. He nodded slowly, resigned but clearly worried, and I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. As darkness fell outside, the hospital room transformed into something otherworldly. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting and contorting into shapes that resembled nothing human, as if they were alive and hungry. Luke lit the candles, their flickering flames casting an ominous glow that flickered eerily in the dim light. I could feel the weight of the air pressing down on us, thick with unspoken realms, as if inviting something dark to emerge from the depths of the unknown. With trembling hands, I opened the red leather-bound book, the pages crackling under my touch, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. I began to chant the incantation, words I could barely comprehend but felt drawn to, as if they were calling out to me from the very fabric of the universe. As I delved deeper into the ritual, I called out for Chelsea, my voice wobbling with emotion, each syllable laced with longing and desperation. Then, something shifted in the atmosphere, a cold rush of energy prickling my skin and raising the hairs on the back of my neck. I felt a presence beside me, and my heart raced with a mix of fear and anticipation. Was it Chelsea? Or something else entirely? Something I had unwittingly summoned? In the flickering candlelight, I saw her. It was Chelsea, but not the vibrant girl I once knew. Her eyes were hollow, devoid of the spark that had always brought her to life, and her expression was twisted into a faint semblance of pain that made my heart ache. "Emma," she breathed, her voice a mere whisper lost in the shadows, a sound that seemed to echo from a distant realm. "You shouldn't have summoned me." A chill coursed through me, clamping down on my heart like a vice. "I had to," I replied, my voice cracking under the weight of my emotions. "I can't lose you again." The desperation in my voice hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Suddenly, the shadows thickened, swirling around us like a storm, pulling us into an abyss I never wished to explore. "You've awakened him," Chelsea warned, her form flickering like the dying flames of our candles, her voice barely more than a whisper. "You need to stop this." But I was beyond reason. A darkness was calling to me, and I had to answer, had to see this through to the end, no matter the cost. It was then I felt his presence, an entity known only as Lugow, slithering out from the shadows, a being that seemed to defy the very laws of nature. He was not of this world, a creature with a voice that echoed like thunder, reverberating through the very core of my being. "You sought to bring her back." "A noble but foolish endeavor," he intoned, his words dripping with disdain. "What are you willing to trade?" My heart sank at the question, a sinking feeling that settled in my stomach. The price was never simple, it was always steep, and I was terrified of what it might entail. Desperation clawed at my insides as I glanced at Luke, who stood frozen in place, horrified but unable to tear his gaze away from the unfolding nightmare. I could feel his suffocating fear. It wrapped tightly around my throat like a noose, a reminder of the reality we were trapped in. "Anything," I said, the words spilling from my lips without a second thought, an impulsive declaration that sealed my fate. With that one utterance, I had sealed my fate irrevocably. Lugol's laughter reverberated through the room, a sound that sent shivers down my spine, a haunting melody that resonated with the very essence of my soul. "Your soul for hers," he intoned, the shadows pulsating around us, alive with the dark energy that flowed from him. I hesitated, fear battling with a returning sense of hope. I could have Chelsea back. We could laugh and be together once more, just like old times, if only I was willing to pay the price. In that moment, I felt compelled. Something within me ignited a chilling resolve that I couldn't ignore. "I accept," I breathed, my voice a mere whisper battling against the storm of uncertainty that threatened to consume me. As I uttered those words, Chelsea's form began to solidify, and for the briefest moment, hope glimmered like a candle flame flickering in the darkness. But as her smile formed, I caught a glimpse of the darkness that lurked behind her eyes, a shadow that seemed to swallow the light. "Emma, don't," she screamed as invisible chains pulled her back into the abyss, her form stretching like a tattered banner in the wind, a haunting image that would forever be etched in my mind. Luke reached for me, desperation etched across his face, but I was entrapped in a web of shadows, pulled closer to Lughal, who watched with malevolent glee. I felt my own essence being ripped away, but I was too far gone to care, too consumed by the thrill of what I had done. There was a sickening thrill coursing through me, a terrifying allure to the dark power I was now awakening, a power that promised everything I desired, but came at an unimaginable cost. Lughal's laughter echoed in the growing silence, consumed by the hate I had unleashed in my own pursuit of misguided love. But as I lost my grip on reality, the void began to close around me, crushing my very being, squeezing out every ounce of light that remained. I could sense every soul that had ever succumbed to Lughal's insatiable hunger, their faces twisted in eternal torment, a gallery of despair that surrounded me. My heart raced as I realized I had become one of them, another lost soul lured into darkness by a desperate cry for connection, a cautionary tale that would never be told. In that haunting crescendo, Chelsea was gone, the candles flickering out one by one, their light snuffed out like the last remnants of hope. I felt only emptiness where hope once resided, a gaping void that echoed with the silence of my choices. My cries were swallowed by the void, a symphony of despair that echoed into eternity, a haunting reminder of what I had lost and what I could never reclaim. Lughal's voice resonated within me, whispering promises of power, of things I could never truly comprehend, but all I felt was the weight of my own sin pressing me down, dragging me deeper into the abyss. I was trapped, spiraling deeper into a labyrinth with no exit, no way out. The realization hit me like a wave crashing against the shore. I had done this to myself. I had called forth the shadows with reckless abandon, and now they had come to collect their due. And as I floated in that eternal abyss, I yearned for light, for life, and for a chance to turn back time, to undo the mistakes that had led me here. But the darkness held me fast, wrapping around me like a cold embrace, and all that remained was the mocking laughter of Lughal, my only company in the haunted depths of despair. This was my pact, a horrifying bargain that kept me tethered in a realm of shadows, forever searching for a way back to the light, a light that now felt impossibly distant, a dream that was slipping through my fingers like grains of sand. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. It all began on a sweltering summer evening, the kind where the air is thick and heavy, and the sun slowly dipped below the horizon, casting unsettling shadows that danced across the neighborhood. I was lounging in my room, my mind drifting through thoughts about the mundane routine of the upcoming school year, feeling the familiar pull of ennui when my cousin Bill burst through the door. His face was flushed, and he was out of breath, a wild spark in his eye that immediately piqued my interest and drew me from my reverie. "Have you heard about Long-Legged Larry?" he exclaimed, plopping down onto my bed with a sense of urgency, his excitement palpable and contagious. I had indeed heard the whispers circulating in school, tales of a grotesque figure lurking in the shadows of Steel Mill Hollow, a long-abandoned industrial site on the outskirts of town that had become the stuff of nightmares. But I never paid much attention. Urban legends were just that, stories meant to thrill and chill, not to be taken seriously or believed in. They were merely fodder for late-night conversations and ghost stories around campfires. "Come on, let's go check it out," Bill urged, an eager grin spreading across his face that made it clear he wanted to impress his friends. The thrill of adventure had a magnetic pull on me, even though my instincts were screaming to stay away. I hesitated at first, fearing the darkness that enveloped the mill at night, but I could see the determination in Bill's eyes, the excitement bubbling just beneath the surface. I knew this meant something to him, a chance to prove himself, so I nodded, and we set off under the fading light, our hearts pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. The path leading to the steel mill was overgrown, nature reclaiming what was once a cacophony of clanking machinery and human labor, leaving behind a ghostly silence that hung in the air. The air grew cooler as we approached the rusty gates, which hung ajar like the gaping mouth of a beast waiting to swallow us whole. Armed with only a flashlight and a flimsy sense of bravery, we ventured inside, the beam of light cutting through the darkness like a knife. The insides of the mill were a labyrinth of rusted pipes and crumbling concrete, an eerie monument to a bygone era. Bill, with his bravado, led the way, recounting the stories as if they were gospel truths, his voice echoing in the vast emptiness. They say Larry lost his legs in an accident here, and now he haunts the place, looking for revenge on anyone who dares to enter, he said, a shiver of excitement running through him. Each creaking floorboard echoed the tension in the air, an ominous reminder that we were not alone in this forsaken place. As we explored deeper, the flashlight flickered ominously, casting dancing shadows on the walls that seemed to come alive with each flicker. I felt a chill run down my spine, a sense of dread creeping in. The further we went, the more sinister our surroundings became. Old tools lay scattered about, remnants of a time long gone, and the walls were smeared with dark stains that I dared not investigate closely. There were whispers too, distant murmurs that felt like they were teasing us, beckoning us deeper into the mill, as if the very structure was alive and aware of our presence. Then we stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. Among the debris, half buried in the dust, were what appeared to be human bones, stark white against the dark earth. A visceral horror washed over me as I realized the significance of our find, the reality of what we had uncovered crashing down like a wave. Bill, we need to leave. This isn't just a story anymore, I murmured, my voice trembling with fear. But Bill, fueled by adrenaline and the thrill of discovery, was captivated, his eyes wide with a mix of fascination and terror. He reached out to touch one of the bones, as if trying to connect with the past. Suddenly, a loud crash reverberated through the mill, shaking the very ground beneath us, and our skin prickled with fear. It felt as if something, or someone, was watching us, lurking just beyond the perimeter of our flashlight's reach, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. My instinct screamed for us to flee, to escape this nightmare, but Bill was blinded by the thrill of the unknown. He dared to call out, "Larry, is that you?" as if challenging the darkness that surrounded us. My heart raced as silence enveloped us, an oppressive weight settling in the air. The buzzing in my ears drowned out my thoughts, leaving only the pounding of my heart and the creeping sense of dread. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had roused something far more terrifying than a mere ghost story, something ancient and malevolent. Then, out of the shadows, a figure emerged, tall, gaunt, its limbs unnaturally long and twisted. I couldn't process what I was seeing, rooted in place by a paralyzing dread that clawed at my insides. "Run!" I finally shouted, shoving Bill toward the exit with all my strength, but he was frozen, entranced by the entity that stood before us, caught in its hypnotic gaze. The figure's skin glistened in the flashlight's beam, a sickly pallor that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it, casting an eerie glow against the dark backdrop of the steel mill. The air grew thick with tension, and I felt like I couldn't breathe, as if the very atmosphere was suffocating me. Before I could grab Bill and yank him away, a horrific sound broke through the silence, echoing off the metal walls, a low, guttural growl that reverberated through my bones, vibrating in the very marrow of my being. Bill stumbled back, and in that split second of confusion, the figure lunged, a blur of darkness that seemed to swallow the light whole. I screamed as I witnessed my cousin vanish into thin air, swallowed by the shadows, his terrified expression etched into my memory forever. Panic surged through me, and I fled, not daring to look back, the primal urge to survive overriding all rational thought. The path seemed endless as I ran, the weight of fear propelling me forward, each step fueled by adrenaline. I burst out of the mill, gasping for breath, the cool night air a stark contrast to the terror I had just escaped. But even though I escaped the clutches of whatever that abomination was, I felt the aftermath crush my soul, a heavy burden of guilt and fear settling in my chest. When I reached the safety of the street lights, breathless and shaking, I turned back, expecting to see Bill emerging any moment, his face pale but alive. But he never did. The silence that followed was deafening, a void where his laughter once echoed, leaving me alone with my thoughts and fears. Days turned into weeks, and I couldn't shake the haunting memories of that night, the images replaying in my mind like a broken record. I tried to explain to anyone who would listen, desperately seeking help to find Bill, but the town dismissed my fears as mere hysteria, their laughter ringing in my ears like a cruel mockery. "You boys were just playing in the old mill. It's nothing but an urban legend," they said, their disbelief cutting deeper than any blade. I found myself standing alone atop the hill overlooking Steel Mill Hollow, the whispers of the past wrapping around me like a shroud, a reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the light. I couldn't let it end this way. I had to tell the truth. Bill had vanished into the night, perhaps claimed by the monster that people said didn't exist, but I knew better now. As the moonlight crept across the ruined mill, illuminating the twisted metal and crumbling concrete, I felt a chill crawl up my spine, a harbinger of what lay within its depths. Steeling my resolve, I decided to gather my courage and uncover the truth of that echoed horror, no matter the cost. I needed to understand what happened, not just for Bill, but for myself too, a ghost of a memory, lost in the abyss of fear, haunting my every step. The journey had transformed from an innocent exploration to a desperate quest for answers. As I ventured back into the shadows, the tale of long-legged Larry now woven into my soul forever. Would I find Bill? Or would I become another victim of the legend, another name whispered in hushed tones around campfires? Only time would tell, but the haunting call of Steel Mill Hollow beckoned me, and I could no longer ignore its grip, the darkness pulling me in like a siren's song, impossible to resist. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. Driving through the dense, shadowy woods of New England, I found myself caught in one of those ordinary moments that gradually morphed into something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long, elongated shadows through the tall, unforgiving trees that surrounded me. I was on my way to visit my parents in a small town called Come by Chance, a place I had grown up in but had since moved away from. The air was cooling as dusk approached, and the chirping of crickets began to fill the silence, creating a rhythm that almost lulled me into a false sense of security, making me forget the eerie stillness of the forest. Just as I rounded a bend in the narrow road, I caught sight of something unusual, a strikingly white elk, standing precariously by the roadside, its presence an unsettling contrast against the darkening backdrop of the forest. Its fur was unkempt, almost matted, and it appeared gaunt, emaciated, as if it had not eaten in days. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for the creature, enthralled by its ethereal beauty yet deeply unsettled by its frail and vulnerable form. There was an aura of unease surrounding it, a sense that something was terribly wrong, but my instinct urged me to slow down and take a closer look, as if drawn by some unseen force. As I cautiously approached, the elk suddenly bolted, charging directly into my path with a speed that belied its frail appearance. The sheer panic of the moment was blinding. I swerved desperately, trying to avoid a collision, but it was too late. I felt the jarring impact as my car slammed into the elk, the sickening crunch echoing in the hollow space of my vehicle. My heart raced as I came to a halt, the engine humming in a dying whisper, the world around me falling into a disorienting silence. To my horror, I witnessed the elk scrambling back onto its feet, its eyes reflecting an unnatural malevolence that sent chills coursing through my body. It stood there, seemingly undeterred by the injury I had inflicted, and then, with a swift and eerily coordinated motion, it began to chase my car. I felt a chill run down my spine as I fumbled to put the vehicle in reverse, panic flooding my veins as the creature grew ever closer, its presence a suffocating weight behind me. I sped down the narrow, winding road, desperation flooding my veins as I prayed to escape its relentless pursuit. In the gathering darkness, the trees loomed ominously, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, and the world outside my car transformed into a shadowy blur. But the elk was relentless, galloping with an unnatural speed, its trail of white a haunting light in the encroaching darkness, a ghostly figure that seemed to defy the very laws of nature. Realizing I needed to leave the road, I made a split-second decision. With little time to think, I veered off onto a small dirt path leading into the depths of the woods. The tires skidded against the damp earth, and branches scratched against the sides of my car as I pushed deeper into the forest, the underbrush closing in around me. The elk followed, its presence a suffocating weight that pressed down on my chest, and I felt my heart pounding in my ears, the sound of it drowning out all rational thought. Suddenly, the engine sputtered, the warning lights flashing ominously in the dim light. I knew I couldn't rely on the car any longer. It was just a matter of time before it gave out completely. In a surge of fear, I jumped out, propelled forward into the oppressive darkness of the trees, hoping the dense underbrush would provide some shelter from my relentless pursuer. I ran blindly, branches whipping against my face and arms as I stumbled through the foliage, my breath coming in ragged gasps. As I made my way deeper into the woods, I stumbled upon a gaping valley. A putrid smell hit me like a wall, and I hesitated at the edge, my breath hitching in my throat as I surveyed the horrifying scene below. The ground was littered with grotesque remnants, the skeletal remains of animals scattered in a macabre display, their bones bleached white by the elements. Dread wrapped around me like a shroud as I took in the horrifying sight. This valley seemed like a grotesque graveyard, a place where life had once thrived but was now consumed by death, and I felt an instinctive realization wash over me. I was indeed the prey. Panic surged through me as I turned to run, but it was too late. The elk emerged from the shadows, its white form a stark contrast against the darkness, a phantom that seemed to glide rather than run. It stood at the edge of the valley, watching me with an intensity that seemed to pierce through my very soul, as if it could see into the depths of my being. I stumbled back, terror taking over my limbs, and I fled in the opposite direction, driven by instinct and fear. With every frantic step, the sense of being watched consumed me, a palpable weight pressing down on my shoulders. I ran until exhaustion clawed at my chest, my muscles burning with fatigue, and just when I thought I couldn't go on, I spotted a dim light flickering in the distance. Hope surged within me as I darted toward it, emerging into a clearing where a small, dilapidated cabin rested against the backdrop of the trees, its windows glowing with a warm light that seemed inviting yet somehow unsettling. Knotting my eyebrows in indecision, I hesitated before deciding to knock on the door, desperation outweighing my fear. After a moment, it creaked open, revealing a woman with wild hair and eyes that sparkled with an unsettling brightness, as if she were illuminated from within. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her voice smooth but laced with something unnerving that sent a shiver down my spine. "I need help," I gasped, stumbling into her home, my heart racing. "There's an elk. It's chasing me. I don't know what to do." "Ah, the white elk," she said, her lips curling into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You encountered it, didn't you?" It has a way of finding those who wander too close, those who stray into its territory. As she spoke, I felt a sense of dread rising within me, an unsettling realization settling in my gut. What do you mean? Is it dangerous? What does it want? Matilda, as she introduced herself, motioned me to sit by the fire, the flickering flames casting eerie shadows on the walls of the cabin. You don't understand, she said, her gaze piercing through me like a knife. It's not just an elk. It has a connection to this land, a pact, if you will. Those who enter its territory often find themselves entwined in its fate, bound to it in ways they cannot comprehend. What fate? I stammered, my heart racing with fear and confusion. What does it want with me? Why is this happening? A price must be paid, she replied cryptically, glancing out the window, her eyes dancing with an eerie light that seemed to reflect the flickering flames. It demands something from you, to balance the scales of existence. That is the way of this place. The walls of the cabin felt as if they were closing in around me, and I felt trapped within her enigmatic words, the weight of her revelation pressing down on me. I could still see the side of the valley and its cavernous depths in my mind, feel the echo of the elk's presence looming over me as I realized the depth of my predicament. Frantic thoughts circled in my mind like vultures, and I managed to find my courage, demanding, what do I have to do to stop this? How can I escape this nightmare? Matilda's expression turned solemn, and her gaze softened, as if she understood the terror that gripped me. You must face it, acknowledge the bond you've formed with the creature. That is the only way to break free from its grasp, or embrace the darkness that lies within yourself. Night cascaded upon the forest around us, the shadows growing deeper and more menacing. I knew the elk was still out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for me to make my next move. With a heavy heart and mounting dread, I had to choose, would I confront my fate, or allow the darkness to consume me completely, to surrender to the terror that had invaded my life? With every moment that passed, the outside world faded into an abyss of uncertainty, and I realized that the true horror lay not in the elk itself, but in the choice I had to make. Would I return to the valley, become part of the grotesque cycle of life and death that seemed to govern this place, or would I stand and fight against the strange bond one had inadvertently formed with the creature? As I looked into Matilda's mysterious eyes, I understood one last thing. The woods were alive, pulsing with a dark energy, and the elk was a part of something much larger than I could fathom. It was a guardian, a predator, a manifestation of the ancient forces that governed this land. And as the night deepened, I made my decision, knowing full well that the path ahead would lead me to either salvation or damnation, and that the choice I made would forever alter the course of my life. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. Since my childhood, I have been utterly captivated by a television show called Ghost Night. Even though the content was spine-chilling and often left me trembling, I found myself unable to pull away from it, drawn in by its allure. The show was hosted by a creepy clown named Victor, whose heavy makeup and unsettling demeanor made him a figure of both fascination and fear. His laugh echoed in the stillness of the night like whispers in the dark, sending shivers racing down my spine and making my heart pound in my chest. Every Friday night, I would prepare myself, filled with anticipation for that hour when Ghost Night would air. The show featured an array of horror stories and supernatural events, recounting chilling legends and eerie tales that made my skin crawl and my heart race. Victor had a unique way of captivating the attention of me and other young viewers, his eyes sparkling with an eerie light that seemed to hold secrets of the dark. Each of his stories sent adrenaline coursing through my veins, as if something sinister was lurking in the shadows, watching me with malicious intent. I vividly remember one particular episode where Victor recounted a harrowing story about missing children. In a small, quiet town, children would vanish into the night, only to be discovered later, completely unrecognizable and lost to their families forever. Victor's deep, haunting voice painted a vivid picture of the despair and terror those children must have felt, and my heart nearly leaped out of my chest as I listened. I knew it was just a show, a mere fabrication of fiction, but that feeling of genuine fear lingered with me long after the credits rolled, haunting my thoughts as I tried to sleep. As time went on, I found myself increasingly addicted to this show, unable to resist its pull. Every Friday, I would sit on the edge of my seat in front of the television, eagerly awaiting Victor's new tale, my heart racing in anticipation. However, as the stories progressed, I began to feel a growing sense of unease that settled in the pit of my stomach. The scenes from those stories would replay in my dreams, and I would wake up in a cold sweat, surrounded by endless darkness, with Victor's haunting laughter echoing in my ears, as if he were mocking my fear and relishing in my torment. Eventually, I reached a breaking point and decided to stop watching the show altogether. The terror it instilled in me made it impossible to relax, especially in the dead of night when shadows danced on the walls and every creak of the house sent chills down my spine. I began to avoid being alone at night, terrified of being haunted by those horrifying stories again. Slowly but surely, I erased Ghost Night from my life, but even years later, I still felt a twinge of fear and nostalgia when I thought back on that experience, like a distant echo of a nightmare that refused to fade. However, that wasn't the end of my troubles. Around the time I turned 20, I received a strange letter that sent a chill down my spine. The envelope had no return address, just a card with Victor's face grinning maniacally on it. It read, "Welcome back, dear viewer." My heart skipped a beat, and I felt as if I had been transported back to that fear-filled night, the memories flooding back with an intensity that left me breathless. Despite my doubts and the sense of foreboding that gripped me, I made the fateful decision to watch Ghost Night again. I turned on the TV, and there was Victor's familiar face flashing on the screen, his grin as unsettling as ever, his eyes glinting with an unexplainable and sinister light. As the show began, my heart raced, and memories of those unsettling stories flooded my mind like a tidal wave, threatening to drown me in fear. This time, Victor told a story about a curse that had befallen a small town. Legend had it that the townspeople were cursed due to their insatiable greed. All their wealth turned to nothing, leaving them with only endless pain and despair. At the story's end, Victor's laughter grew increasingly sharp and mocking, as if he derived pleasure from the misfortunes of the unfortunate souls. Panic washed over me, and I desperately wanted to turn off the TV, but my hands seemed unresponsive, as if they were trapped in a vice grip. Suddenly, the screen flickered with eerie light, and Victor's laughter grew louder, threatening to consume me whole. I felt dizzy, and the scene around me began to twist and warp, pulling me deeper into the abyss. Before I knew it, I found myself in a strange and desolate place, surrounded by barren land and a dark sky filled with a few wispy clouds that seemed to mock my presence. In that moment, I realized I had been pulled into Victor's story, trapped within the very narrative that had once terrified me. The air was thick with a foul stench, and low whispers filled my ears, telling secrets that were never meant to be known, secrets that sent chills racing down my spine. I desperately tried to escape, but the scenery kept shifting, as if mocking my helplessness and delighting in my torment. In that barren land, I saw the missing children, their faces twisted in despair, their eyes filled with endless sorrow and longing. They silently cried out for help, as if to tell me they had once been viewers of this show too, now eternally trapped in this nightmarish reality. My heart ached for them, and I reached out to touch them, to comfort them, but an invisible force pushed me away, leaving me feeling powerless and lost. Just when I thought all hope was lost, Victor appeared before me once more. He still wore that eerie smile, his eyes flashing with an incomprehensible light that sent fear coursing through my veins. His voice echoed in my ear like a ghost, chilling and haunting. Welcome back, dear viewer. You finally understand. This is all to make you experience true fear. I felt weak, filled with despair and hopelessness. Victor's laughter echoed around me, mocking my earlier choices and the path that had led me here. I wanted to fight back, to find a way to escape, but I found myself with nowhere to run, the surrounding darkness surging like a tide, ready to swallow me whole and drag me into its depths. In that moment of realization, I understood that I could never escape this terrifying cycle. No matter how hard I tried, Victor's stories would forever haunt me, becoming an inescapable shadow in my mind that I could never shake off. As the darkness spread, my consciousness began to fade, as if I were trapped in an endless nightmare from which there was no awakening. When I finally woke up, I found myself still lying on the couch, the TV screen flickering with Victor's smiling face, an unsettling reminder of my ordeal. Panic set in as I tried to turn off the TV, only to find my fingers unresponsive, as if they were bound by some invisible force. Victor's voice rang out again, echoing in my mind, "Welcome back, dear viewer. The story has only just begun." Despair washed over me like a tidal wave as I realized I was trapped in this terrifying loop, unable to escape from Victor's grasp. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't break free from his control. My life turned into a painful existence, the nightmarish stories replaying in my mind, taunting and mocking my helplessness at every turn. In the following days, I tried everything imaginable to break this curse that had taken hold of me. I stopped watching TV altogether and avoided anything related to the show. Yet, Victor's shadow lingered, haunting my dreams and bringing with it endless fear and despair that I could not shake off. I felt as if I were being followed by a ghost, a constant reminder of my past. Eventually, I came to accept that I might never escape this curse, that Victor's stories would always be with me, an indelible shadow in my mind that I could not erase. I started to embrace this fact. Even though fear still filled my heart and haunted my thoughts, I understood that only by facing it could I find a glimmer of relief, a chance at peace. So, I made the decision to confront Victor and reveal my fears to him, to stand up to the very thing that had tormented me for so long. One dark night, I turned on the TV again, and there was Victor's smiling face flashing on the screen once more, a chilling sight that sent shivers down my spine. His eyes sparkled with an unusual light, as if he were waiting for my arrival, eager to see how I would respond. "Welcome back, dear viewer," Victor's voice echoed like a ghost in my ear, chilling and familiar. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," I said firmly, my voice steady despite the tremor in my heart. Victor's laughter grew even sharper, cruel and mocking, as if he relished my defiance. "You think you can escape? Fear is eternal. You will never break free from my control. I will always be here, lurking in the shadows." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself and gather my thoughts. "Maybe I can't escape, but I can choose not to be afraid of you. You have no power over me unless I give it to you." As my words hung in the air, Victor's laughter suddenly stopped, and the light on the screen dimmed, casting a shadow over his face. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, as if my bound spirit had finally been set free from the chains that had held me captive for so long. However, just when I thought I had finally conquered my fear, Victor's figure reappeared before me, more menacing than ever. His eyes blazed with anger, as if accusing me of my ignorance and daring to defy him. "You think you can defeat me?" he whispered, his voice thick with menace and malice. "I don't need to defeat you," I replied, though a wave of panic washed over me, threatening to drown my newfound courage. "I just need to face my fear. I need to confront the darkness that you represent." Victor's laughter echoed again, but this time I didn't feel afraid. As his laughter resonated in my ears, I realized that fear wasn't my enemy. It was a part of me, a reflection of my own vulnerabilities. Only by accepting it could I find true freedom and liberation from the grip of terror that had held me for so long. Eventually, Victor's figure faded away, and the TV screen returned to calm, a quiet stillness settling in around me. I knew that while I might never fully escape this curse, I was no longer the frightened child ruled by fear. I had learned to coexist with fear, accepting its presence as a part of my life rather than a force to be fought against. From that day on, I never saw Victor again. Though he remained in my memory, a lingering specter of my past, I no longer feared him. Fear became a part of my life, but I understood that only by facing it could I find true relief, a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. I had finally taken control of my narrative, rewriting the story of my life on my own terms. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. As a property inspector, I prided myself on having seen it all. From crumbling, derelict buildings that whispered stories of the past to pristine mansions that gleamed with wealth, each inspection brought its own set of surprises and challenges. I had faced everything from moldy basements to collapsing roofs, but nothing could have prepared me for the harrowing experience I would encounter on that fateful day in the Hollow House. It had been an ordinary Tuesday when I received the assignment. Just another routine check on an abandoned property located on the outskirts of town. I'd heard whispers and half-hearted rumors about this house, but I had always dismissed them as mere folklore, nothing to take seriously. As I parked my van in front of the dilapidated structure, an unsettling feeling clawed at the back of my mind, like a persistent itch that refused to go away. The house loomed over me, its cracked windows resembling hollow eyes, staring back as if it were waiting for something, or perhaps someone, to step inside. I took a deep breath and pushed the heavy oak door open. It creaked loudly, the sound echoing ominously through the empty halls. The air was thick with dust, each breath I took carrying a musty smell that spoke of years of neglect and abandonment. My flashlight pierced the darkness, revealing faded wallpaper peeling from the walls and remnants of a once homey atmosphere that now felt foreign and unsettling. But something was off, very off. I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched, as if unseen eyes were tracking my every move, lurking just beyond the shadows. As I explored the ground floor, I stumbled upon a room that seemed untouched by time. In the center stood an old rocking horse, its paint chipped and colors faded beyond recognition. The craftsmanship was exquisite, a testament to a bygone era, but it felt eerie, almost alive, as if it held secrets within its worn frame. I reached out to touch the horse, but as my fingers grazed the surface, a chill ran down my spine, icy and penetrating. I pulled my hand back, a sense of dread washing over me, filling me with an inexplicable fear. I shook off the feeling and moved on, determined to complete my inspection. The next room I entered was a small nursery. Toys lay scattered across the floor, worn and covered in dust, remnants of childhood long forgotten. I rifled through them, trying to find anything salvageable, anything that might explain the house's history. That's when I heard it, a soft, plaintive sound coming from the corner. My blood ran cold as I turned to look. There, curled up in a ball, was a man, completely naked, his body gaunt and covered in dirt. His eyes were wide, staring blankly at the wall as though he were lost in a different world, trapped in some nightmarish existence. "Hey!" I called hesitantly, taking a cautious step back, my instinct screaming at me to flee. "Are you all right?" He didn't move, his gaze fixed on the wall, unblinking. I felt an urge to run, to escape this nightmarish scene, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. He looked so fragile, so broken, a mere shadow of a person. Maybe he was just a squatter, someone who had fallen on hard times, but anger bubbled inside me. How had he gotten in here? As I turned to leave, the man suddenly sat up, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my heart race and my skin crawl. "Get out," he rasped, his voice hoarse and eerie, echoing in the silence of the room. "Leave this place immediately. It's not safe." Before I could respond, he fell back to the ground, reducing again to a silent huddle, as if he were a forgotten doll. I stumbled backward, my instincts screaming at me to escape. I turned and ran through the dark corridors, the sound of my own heartbeat drowning out everything else, a frantic rhythm that matched my rising panic. I burst out of the front door, gasping for fresh air, feeling as though I had narrowly escaped some unseen horror. I ran to my van, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I fumbled to dial 911. I reported my discovery, my voice trembling as I recounted the details, but when the police arrived, the house appeared just as it always had, empty and silent, a facade of normalcy. They searched the rooms, their flashlights casting moving shadows across the walls, but found nothing. No horse, no man. It was as if they had walked into another dimension where reality shifted and twisted, leaving no trace of the terror I had witnessed. "Are you sure he was here?" one of the officers asked, skepticism dripping from his voice, his eyes narrowing as he scrutinized me. I wanted to argue, to shout that I wasn't lying, but fear silenced me. They finally left, reassured that I was mistaken, that I had imagined the whole thing. I returned to the office, my normal life feeling impossibly distant, as if I had crossed some invisible boundary into a realm of darkness. 2 days passed before I ran into my colleague, Willie. We often worked together, and I felt compelled to share what had happened in the Hollow House, desperate to unburden myself of the weight of my experience. As I recounted the story, Willie's expression turned grave, his brow furrowing with concern. "People talk about that place," he said, his voice low and serious. "They call it the Hollow House because it takes things. Inspectors have gone in and never come out. It feeds on fear and darkness, drawing in those who dare to enter." I scoffed, rolling my eyes, dismissing his words as mere superstition. "You can't be serious. It's just an old house." "I am," Willie insisted, his tone unwavering. "It was not by chance that you found that man. There's something deeply wrong with that house. Promise me you won't go back there." I made a half-hearted promise, but the thought of returning pulled at me like a magnet, an irresistible force that I couldn't ignore. What if the man was still there? What if he needed help? My curiosity began to gnaw at me, growing stronger with each passing hour. A week later, I found myself driving back to the Hollow House, my heart pounding in my chest, a mix of fear and anticipation coursing through my veins. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced eerily across the yard, creating a macabre tapestry of light and dark. I parked and approached the house, a sense of foreboding washing over me like a cold wave. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside, my flashlight illuminating the way ahead, revealing the decay and despair that lay within. I searched room after room, but there was no sign of the man. I'd convinced myself that I would find him, that maybe he had answers, explanations for the horrors I had encountered. As I walked to the nursery once more, a chill filled the air, and I felt that familiar sensation of being watched, a prickling awareness that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. Suddenly, the rocking horse began to sway, as if someone was riding it, the creaking sound filling the silence with an almost sinister rhythm. My breath caught in my throat, my heart racing as I stumbled back, panic surging through me. That's when I heard it, a soft giggle echoing through the room, wrapping around me like a twisted embrace, a sound filled with malice and mockery. I spun around, heart racing, and that's when I saw him again. The man lay lifeless on the floor, his eyes glassy and vacant, devoid of life. Panic surged through me, a tidal wave of terror crashing over my senses. I wasn't alone. The house began to shift and bend, the walls pulsating as if alive, breathing in sync with my mounting fear. Whispers filled the air, incoherent yet full of malice, a cacophony of voices that seemed to echo from the very depths of the house. "Leave while you still can." I dashed for the exit, my pulse pounding in my ears, a frantic drumbeat urging me to escape. I felt shadows closing in around me, tendrils of darkness reaching out, wrapping around my limbs like a vice. It was suffocating, a claustrophobic grip that threatened to pull me under. Just as I reached the front door, a force pulled me back, an invisible hand grasping at my throat. I couldn't breathe, panic clawing at my chest. I fought against the darkness, every ounce of strength I had to break free from its grasp. The door swung open with a creak that echoed like a death knell. With one final burst of energy, I pushed through and collapsed onto the ground outside, gasping for air, my lungs burning. I scrambled to my feet, but the house stood silent once more, its haunting presence looming behind me, a specter that refused to let go. I bolted to my van, shaking uncontrollably, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I threw the door open, and as I fumbled with the keys, I glanced back at the hollow house, unable to shake the feeling that it was watching me. It was still there, unchanged, but I knew it was far from empty. I would never return, I vowed silently, my heart racing with the promise of safety. Days turned into weeks, and the experience haunted me relentlessly. I tried to resume my life, to bury the memories deep within, but shadows crept into my thoughts, lurking just beneath the surface. I couldn't shake the feeling that the hollow house had changed me, that it had taken a piece of my soul, leaving me hollow and empty inside. Then came the news that Willie had gone missing. He was last seen heading to the very same hollow house, driven by his own curiosity and perhaps a desire to confront the darkness. My heart sank as I heard the news. I had pushed him away from the truth, and now he was gone, swallowed by the very shadows I had tried to escape. In the following days, I received a text from an unknown number, a chilling message that sent shivers down my spine. "Beware the hollow house. It knows you." I shivered, and a sense of dread gripped me, tightening its hold like a noose. I desperately tried to reach out to the authorities, but they brushed me off, dismissing my fears as paranoia. "No new leads," they said. "Just another disappearance in a long line of them, another victim of the house's insatiable hunger." Weeks later, I met a group of locals at a diner. They had gathered, their voices low and conspiratorial, gossiping about Willie's disappearance. I listened intently, my heart racing as they spun stories of others who had vanished into those walls, tales of horror and despair. They spoke of the house as if it were a living entity, hungry for souls, feeding on fears and nightmares. Many had heard the whispers, felt the cold touch of the darkness within, and I felt a chill creep down my spine. As the conversations deepened, I couldn't help but notice a stranger in the corner of the diner, a man with a gaunt face who seemed to watch me intently, his gaze piercing and unsettling. My blood ran cold as I recalled the man I had found in the hollow house. This stranger resembled him eerily, and a sense of dread washed over me. Suddenly, the man stood up and approached me, his movements deliberate and slow. His eyes bore into mine with an unsettling familiarity, a recognition that sent a jolt of fear through me. "You've seen it, haven't you?" he said softly, a hint of a smile forming on his lips, a smile that held no warmth. "The house, it never forgets." I gaped at him, paranoia seeping into my thoughts like a poison. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. This man, a part of the house's twisted design, here to drag me back into its depths. I took a step back, heart pounding, instinct screaming at me to flee from this nightmare. "Stay away from me!" I shouted, the cafe falling silent as everyone turned to stare, their eyes wide with shock. The man only chuckled softly, a sound devoid of warmth, filled with malice. "You can't run from what you've seen. We are connected now. The house has marked you. I turned and bolted for the door, heart hammering in my chest, the weight of his words pressing down on me. Outside, I gasped for breath, my mind racing with panic and fear. I had to leave this place. I had to escape. But as I drove away, I couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror. The hollow house stood dark and foreboding against the horizon, an eternal sentinel watching my every move, a reminder of the horror I had encountered. From that day on, my life spiraled into madness. I could no longer sleep. Visions of the hollow house haunted my dreams, twisting and turning into nightmarish scenarios. I would hear whispers in the wind, feel the chilling presence of that man following me, always just out of sight. I was trapped in a reality that spiraled downward, unable to break free from the grip of fear that the hollow house had cast upon me. And whenever I caught sight of old buildings or decrepit houses, I would remember the hoarse warnings of that nameless man. Get out! Leave this place immediately. I thought I had escaped, but as I lay awake at night, a sense of dread enveloped me like a shroud. How many souls had been lost like Willie, drawn to the depths of the hollow house? What hidden secrets lay within those walls, waiting to ensnare the next unsuspecting victim? As long as I lived, the hollow house would remain a shadow, lurking at the edges of my mind, a constant reminder of the darkness that awaited anyone who dared to enter its grasp. My fate was sealed, intertwined with the horrors I had witnessed, and in the end, the house would always win, its insatiable hunger never truly satisfied. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I still remember the day my life shattered into a million pieces, a moment forever etched in my mind. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind that filled the air with warmth and laughter, a perfect day for a family outing. I had taken my two little ones, Mia and Lucas, to the riverbank, a place we often visited for picnics and play. The water sparkled like diamonds under the sun, and the gentle sound of it flowing was soothing, almost hypnotic. I had set up a small area to wash our clothes, thinking it would be a perfect way to spend the day while keeping a watchful eye on them as they played nearby. As I scrubbed the fabric against the rocks, I could hear their giggles echoing through the trees, a beautiful sound that filled my heart with joy and warmth. The innocence of their laughter was a balm for my soul. But in my concentration, I let my guard down, becoming too absorbed in my task. I didn't realize how quickly they had wandered away from my sight, drawn by the allure of the water and the promise of adventure. When I finally turned around, my heart sank into the depths of despair. The river, once a source of joy and laughter, had transformed into a grave, a place of unimaginable sorrow. Panic surged through me as I frantically searched the banks, calling their names, my voice growing hoarse with fear and desperation. The world around me blurred as I recalled the moments of joy we had shared just hours before. I remembered the moment I saw them, lifeless, floating in the water, their small bodies still and silent. Time seemed to freeze as I rushed into the cold water, the shock of it enveloping me as I pulled them to shore, my heart racing with hope that somehow they would awaken. But it was too late. My beautiful children were gone, and with them, a part of my soul was irrevocably lost. In the weeks that followed, I was a shell of my former self, existing in a world that felt empty and hollow. The house, once filled with laughter and love, now felt like a mausoleum, each room a haunting reminder of their absence. The laughter that once filled our home was replaced by an unbearable silence, a silence that echoed through the walls and into my heart. I became a ghost in my own life, wandering through days that blended into nights, consumed by grief that wrapped around me like a suffocating shroud. Friends and family tried to reach out, offering their condolences and support, but I pushed them away, unable to bear their pity and concern. I felt like a burden, and the weight of their sympathy only deepened my despair. It was during this dark time that I first heard the whispers of the legend, the tale of La Llorona, the weeping woman. They said she roamed the rivers, searching for her lost children, her cries echoing through the night, a mournful sound that chilled the bones. I dismissed it at first, thinking it was just a story meant to frighten children. However, as the nights grew longer and my dreams turned into nightmares, I found myself drawn to the story, unable to shake the feeling that there was a connection between my grief and the legend. One evening, as I lay in bed, my mind racing with memories of my children, I heard it, the soft sound of laughter drifting through the window, a sound that was unmistakably Mia and Lucas, their voices like a melody I had longed to hear. My heart raced as I shot up, filled with a mixture of hope and dread, and rushed to the window. Outside, the moon cast an eerie glow over the river, illuminating the dark water. In the distance, I saw her, a woman in white, her long hair flowing like shadows against the night sky. She stood by the water, her back to me, and I felt an inexplicable pull to her, as if she were somehow tied to my own sorrow. "Mommy!" I heard their voices again, clearer this time, mingled with the sound of a horse-drawn carriage clattering over the cobblestones. I stumbled back, fear gripping me, my heart pounding in my chest. What was happening? Was I losing my mind? I closed my eyes, willing it all to be a dream, a cruel trick of my imagination. But when I opened them, she was still there, her head turned slightly, as if she could sense my gaze. It was a moment that sent chills down my spine, and I felt a mixture of fear and longing. Days turned into weeks, and the occurrences escalated, becoming more frequent and more unsettling. I would hear their laughter at odd hours, the sound of tiny feet running through the halls, and the soft creaking of the floorboards as if they were playing hide and seek in the shadows of our home. Each time, I would rush to find them, my heart filled with hope, only to be met with silence and the cold emptiness of the house. I began to question my sanity, my grief morphing into something darker, more sinister, like a shadow creeping into my mind, whispering doubts and fears. The news of missing children began to circulate in our small town, sending ripples of fear through the community. Parents whispered about the weeping woman, warning each other to keep their children close, to never let them wander near the river alone. I felt a chill run down my spine as I listened to their conversations, the weight of their words pressing down on me. Was I somehow connected to this? Was my grief awakening something that should have remained buried, something that had been best left forgotten? One night, after another sleepless evening filled with nightmares and restless tossing, I decided I could no longer stay in this house, haunted by memories and the presence of the unknown that seemed to linger in every corner. I packed our things, determined to escape the torment that had consumed me for far too long. My husband, though concerned for my well-being, agreed. We needed a fresh start, away from the whispers and the shadows that had taken residence in our lives. We found a quaint little house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by tall trees and a small garden that seemed to beckon us with its promise of peace. It felt peaceful, a stark contrast to the darkness that had enveloped us in our previous home. But even here, I could not escape the feeling of being watched, as if unseen eyes were following my every move. The nights were still filled with the echoes of laughter, and sometimes I could swear I saw a figure lurking just beyond the tree line, a fleeting shadow that sent shivers down my spine. One evening, as I sat on the porch, trying to soak in the beauty of the setting sun, I noticed a group of children playing in the distance. They were laughing and running, their joy infectious, and for a moment, I smiled, momentarily forgetting my sorrow. But then, I noticed a girl among them, her long dark hair flowing behind her like a river of night. She looked familiar, and my heart raced as I realized she resembled Mia, my precious daughter. "Mommy! Look!" I heard her voice call out, and I felt the world tilt beneath me, my heart pounding in my chest. I stood up, ready to run towards them, to embrace my child, but just as quickly, they vanished into thin air, leaving only the sound of the wind rustling through the leaves, mocking my hopes. My heart sank, despair washing over me. I was losing my grip on reality, slipping further into a nightmare from which I could not awaken. I confided in my husband, pouring out my fears and the strange occurrences that had begun to plague me, but he could only offer comfort, unable to truly understand the depth of my despair. I began to isolate myself, spending hours by the river, hoping to catch a glimpse of my children, or perhaps the weeping woman herself, the figure that had become a haunting presence in my mind. One night, as I stood by the water's edge, the moonlight shimmering on the surface, I heard her cry, a mournful wail that echoed through the darkness, chilling me to the bone. It sent shivers down my spine, and I felt compelled to answer, as if my heart recognized the pain in her voice. "I'm here!" I shouted into the night, my voice trembling with emotion. "I'm here! I've lost them too!" The water rippled, and for a moment, I thought I saw her, a figure in white, her face obscured by shadows and sorrow. "Help me," she whispered, her voice like a breeze, carrying the weight of 1,000 lost souls. "Help me find them!" I fell to my knees, the weight of my grief crashing over me like a tidal wave, the pain threatening to consume me. "I can't help you," I sobbed, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't save my own children. As the night wore on, I felt a strange connection to her, a bond forged in shared loss and heartache. I realized then that I was becoming her, a mother forever searching for her lost children, trapped in a cycle of despair. The line between my reality and the legend blurred, and I found myself embracing the darkness that had enveloped my heart, a darkness that felt strangely comforting. Days turned into a blur as I became consumed by the legend, my nights filled with restless wandering along the riverbank, searching for signs of Mia and Lucas. I began to dress in white, the fabric flowing around me like a ghostly shroud, a reflection of my sorrow. The townspeople whispered about me, calling me the weeping woman, and I reveled in it, feeling a sense of belonging in my sorrow, a connection to the very legend that had once terrified me. But with each passing night, the laughter of children grew fainter, replaced by the chilling cries of the weeping woman echoing in the depths of my mind. I could feel her presence, urging me to join her in her eternal search, to become one with her in our shared grief. I was losing myself, my identity fading into the shadows, merging with the sorrow that had become my existence. Then, one fateful night, as I stood by the river, I saw them, Mia and Lucas, their faces illuminated by the moonlight, their laughter ringing clear and bright, a sound I had longed to hear. My heart soared, and I called out to them, desperation lacing my voice, but they didn't seem to hear me. They continued to play, unaware of my presence, lost in their own world of innocence. Desperate, I stepped closer to the water's edge, reaching out for them, my heart aching with longing. "Please, come back to me!" I cried, tears streaming down my face, blurring my vision. But as I reached for them, the water began to swirl, pulling me in with a force I could not resist. I struggled against the current, but it was too strong, dragging me deeper into its depths. In that moment, I understood the truth. The weeping woman was not just a legend, she was a warning, a reflection of my own despair. I had become her, lost in my grief, forever searching for my children in a world that had turned its back on me, where joy and laughter had been replaced by sorrow and loss. As I was pulled under, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a tranquility I had not known in years. I was finally with them, my beautiful children, and together we would wander the riverbanks, forever lost in the echoes of laughter and the whispers of the night, bound by love and sorrow, united in our eternal search for solace. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. The call came in at an unholy hour, as they often do in our line of work. I had been a rescue diver for the past 5 years, but the frenzied tones of my superior's voice sent a chill down my spine, a feeling I had grown all too accustomed to. A massive earthquake had struck the coastal town of Seabrook, sending shockwaves through the community, and amidst the chaos, a dam had given way, flooding the surrounding area. The urgency in his words was palpable, a siren wailing in the back of my mind that screamed at me to act without hesitation. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me, knowing that lives hung in the balance. I rushed to the station, adrenaline replacing the remnants of sleep still clinging to my body like a heavy fog. As I donned my gear, I glanced at my team, their faces a blend of determination and apprehension. We all knew the stakes, lives were on the line, and the clock was ticking. Yet, as I looked into the eyes of my colleague Garrett, I saw something deeper, a shared fear that we wouldn't come back from this one. It was a fear that gnawed at the edges of our resolve, an unspoken understanding that this mission could be different from all the others. We loaded into the rescue boat, cutting through the murky waters of the flooded town. Buildings half submerged stood like tombstones in a watery graveyard, silent witnesses to the destruction that had unfolded. The cries for help echoed through the still air, mingling with the distant sounds of desperation and sorrow that filled the atmosphere. I had trained for this, or so I thought, but nothing could prepare me for what lay beneath the surface, lurking in the shadows of the depths. Descending beneath the turbulent waves, the world above faded into a bleak green murk, a disorienting haze that swallowed all light. The visibility was near zero. Our flashlights barely pierced through the darkness, illuminating only fleeting glimpses of the desolation around us. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach as we ventured deeper, surrounded by the stillness that only the depths could offer. My mind raced with possibilities, unnerving thoughts lurking like shadows in the back of my consciousness, whispering doubts that threatened to unravel my focus. We began to navigate through a network of submerged structures, the remnants of homes now twisted with decay and covered in a shroud of darkness. My heart pounded as we moved cautiously, communicating through a series of hand signals as the water enveloped us like a suffocating blanket. The silence beneath the surface was eerie. I could hear the faint echo of my own breath, a reminder of the fragility of life in such a place. Each heartbeat felt like a countdown, amplifying the tension that hung in the water. Hours passed as we searched, each passing minute stretching into an eternity. With every tick of the clock, our hope dwindled, and my anxiety morphed into a tangible weight pressing against my chest. We were somewhere near what used to be the town square when tragedy struck without warning. A sudden flash of movement from the corner of my eye jolted me from my thoughts. A piece of debris, unsteady under the pressure of the currents, tumbled toward Garrett without warning. In an instant, everything turned chaotic, the world around us spiraling into turmoil. I watched in horror as the beam struck him. His cry was swallowed by the water, a sound that would haunt me forever. Panic surged through me as I rushed to his side, but the force of the impact had left him disoriented and bleeding, his eyes wide with shock. I motioned for the others to assist, the signal urgent and frantic, my heart racing as I fought against the tide of panic that threatened to consume us. As I bent down to check on him, my heart felt as though it had dropped into the depths below, a heavy stone sinking into the abyss. Time dilated, every second felt impossibly stretched as I struggled against the terror that clawed at my throat. Just when it seemed like we might regain some semblance of control, another rumble echoed through the underwater landscape, reverberating with a fearsome roar that resonated deep into my bones. It was a reminder of the catastrophe above us, a reminder that the world we knew was crumbling. The ground shifted beneath us, and the water around us began to churn violently, a chaotic maelstrom pulling us down into a dark abyss. My instinct screamed at me to escape, to abandon our search and save myself, but the thought of leaving Garrett behind was unbearable. However, in that moment of uncertainty, the weight of the world pressed against my chest, stealing my breath and clouding my judgment. Desperation clawed at me as I locked eyes with Garrett, who was sinking into unconsciousness, his strength fading with every passing moment. I couldn't let him slip away into the darkness. I summoned every ounce of strength left in my body and dove down deeper, battling the currents that threatened to toss me around like a mere leaf in a storm. I reached for him, our hands brushing against each other, feeling the warmth draining from his body, a sensation that sent a shiver of dread through me. In that visceral moment, I felt the chill of hopelessness enveloping us both, wrapping around us like a suffocating shroud. But as if the universe conspired against us, a sudden pull against my equipment nearly sent me into a tailspin. I glimpsed the dark cavernous mouth of a cave, a tomb waiting to swallow us whole. The water was rising fast, and I was losing precious time, each second slipping away like sand through my fingers. With my vision blurring and the darkness closing in, I made a split-second decision that would haunt me forever. I yelled for the team to help Garrett as I fought my way toward the cave, my heart hammering in my chest as I forged ahead, knowing full well that every second counting against his life was also counting against mine. I emerged into another chamber, one filled with silence and darkness, eerily beautiful yet terrifying, a void that seemed to echo with the cries of the lost. It was chaotic in my mind, drowning in regret and fear, a cacophony of screams filling my ears, though I knew they were mostly from inside my head, a tormenting chorus that refused to quiet. I lost track of time, fighting off despair as I searched for a way out, my lungs screaming for air, when suddenly I felt the ominous pressure of water, an inky black reservoir closing around me, a reminder of the fate that awaited me if I failed. I was running out of time. I scrambled back, desperately retracing my steps to find my team, my heart racing with panic. But with every twist and turn, I could sense the shadows looming closer, whispering tales of despair that wrapped around me like a vice, tightening with every passing moment. The darkness felt alive, a hungry beast waiting to claim its next victim. When I finally broke the surface, gasping for air, I was met with chaos above the surface, rescue boats scattered around like leaves in a storm, frantic shouts piercing the air, a cacophony of voices blending into one overwhelming sound. It felt surreal, and for a fleeting moment, relief washed over me like a wave crashing on the shore. But as I scrambled back onto the boat, I understood the stakes of my decision, the price paid, the weight of loss bearing heavily on my soul, a burden I would carry forever. Where was Garrett? The realization struck like a blackened wave crashing against the rocks. They couldn't find him. He was gone, lost to the depths. The darkness I had encountered below the surface carried into my waking life, a ghost that whispered reminders of what I had lost, of the friend who had been by my side in countless missions, now swallowed by the abyss. The days turned into nights, and every moment was stained with guilt and anguish, a relentless reminder of my failure. I watched as rescuers continued the search, the town enveloped in sorrow, its heart broken by the tragedy that had unfolded. I couldn't shake the memory of Garrett's face, the look of fear, the fading warmth of his hand as I let go, a moment that would forever be etched in my mind. Ultimately, the experience shifted something fundamental within me. I resigned from my position, the beach where I had once found solace becoming a cruel reminder of the depths I had descended into. I thought I would forget, that time would dull the pain, but his absence became a constant gnawing presence, an echo of warnings I did not heed, a reminder of the fragility of life and the choices we make. Now, I live with the shadows of that day hanging over me, a specter of despair that haunts my dreams, a relentless reminder of the darkness I faced. The ocean's call still beckons, but I know too well what lies beneath. The depths of despair hold too many secrets, and I am not prepared to face them again. I walk on the shore, the waves crashing against the rocks like memories battering a broken soul, each crash a reminder of what was lost. Sometimes I can still hear his laughter, faintly mingling with the sound of the waves, a ghostly reminder of the friend I lost, swallowed by the abyss, a bond that could not be severed even by death. I have traded the thrill of the depths for the quiet of the shore, where the seagulls cry, but the answers remain shrouded in silence, lost in the depths of the ocean. My soul bears the scars of that day, a permanent mark that serves as a reminder that some depths are best left unexplored, and some memories are too heavy to carry. Alright, that's the end of today's story. Thank you for joining me on this thrilling journey through the shadows of life and death. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the little bell to get more spine-chilling tales from Whisper of Horror. Remember, every soul has a story, and here, we give them a voice. See you next time. Stay curious, stay cautious, and keep whispering horror.